Welcome everyone. My name is Martin Wennerblom and I'm the Marketing Director at InMotion Technologies, part of Sappi Group. And I'd like to welcome you all to this session. Please remember that this session is also being recorded and will be available to watch on demand following the session. If you have any questions during the session, please add them to the Q&A. You will find the tab on the right of your screen. Note that your questions will be sent privately. With that, I would like to introduce our speaker. We are honored to have with us today Antti Vainio, a visionary leader and sustainability strategist with an extensive background in the public policy, business development, and environmental advocacy. Antti is also the founder of Vainio AB, a consultancy firm specializing in sustainability strategy and ESG consulting. His expertise spans a wide range of sustainability issues, including renewable energy, electric vehicles, transportation policy, and climate change mitigation. He's a passionate advocate for sustainable solutions and a proven track record of developing and implementing effective strategies to address environmental changes. I am confident that you will find Antti's insight and expertise to be invaluable. Please join me in welcoming Antti to the stage.
Oh, thank you very much, Martin. Thank you for the really nice, warm welcome. I think it's really great to be here and to be able to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, which is, of course, how companies can turn sustainability into their competitive advantage. And I'm going to be talking about that by using the example of electrification. And I'm going to start with looking at some earlier transformations that we've seen and how businesses have reacted, both looking at some good examples and some not so successful examples for some lessons learned. I'm going to then frame electrification in light of this current mega trend, really, that is the transition into more sustainable societies, because I think that's crucial for us to understand in order to find our best business opportunities in this transformation. And then finally, in my main part, I'm going to be looking at how companies are reacting at the moment in the light of electrification, especially using examples from the field of charging infrastructure, how companies are finding new business opportunities there. And I do this with some background within the charging sector. As Martin was saying, I've got my background as a government advisor, and then I've worked with ChargePoint, for example, as their policy lead in the Nordic region. So that's kind of my home base. And even though I'm today running my own consultancy company, I feel like I kind of always get pulled into the electrification sphere. And I'm still working with lots of companies within that area. So with that said, let's get started. And we're going to start with a map of Finland. And you might wonder why. It's not only because I come from Finland, but it's also because I think it's really useful for us to look at some examples of companies that have had it all and then in light of transformations simply have failed. I think that's something that's really interesting to look at in light of this development that we're seeing today. And of course, when I think about companies like that, I'm thinking about Nokia, because I grew up in Finland in the 1990s, and I remember both how everyone had Nokia phones. It was just out of the question to have anything else, but also how friends and relatives became millionaires all of a sudden in the stock market because of investing in Nokia, or how some friends from school took summer jobs at the Nokia factory, and it was just kind of everywhere. It seemed like there was no stopping them. They were the pride of the nation in together with these ice hockey players in the national team, or a couple of race car drivers like Mika Häkkinen. It was the identity of Finland, really. We were sure that there was no stopping them. And then, of course, came the iPhone and the touch screen. And all of a sudden, these bigger phones with their keypads weren't as attractive anymore. And of course, we can see lots of examples like this with Blockbuster that couldn't deal with Netflix and streaming, or Borders and others that couldn't deal with the competition from Amazon and online retail. And then we can also see, of course, companies that have instead succeeded in light of change. Both startups like Airbnb and others that have kind of transformed whole industries, transformed technology and consumer behavior. We can also see companies like IBM or Sony or Apple or 3M that went from a failed mine enterprise into something that's really defining our everyday lives with the post-it notes and stuff like that, which is just a great example of a company that's thrived and innovated through times of change. And I think if we look at some of these earlier examples, we can really see that companies that failed often didn't really see what was going on around them in terms of change. They were so focused on their own product.
Antti,
Kind of this.
sorry,
Yes.
but I think we're not switching screen here because you are on slide 2. Am I right?
On slide 2 with still
Yes.
on the iPhone slide.
Because we're not seeing that one. So if you...
Oh, what are you seeing?
We're seeing the other screen. That's why. Sorry to interrupt, but...
That's okay. Okay.
So
what are you seeing now?
We're seeing where you have the slides on the left side and the first page. Now we can see slide number three. Yes.
Ah, that's a shame. And now that I'm sharing my whole slideshow?
No, we still see your screen there.
Ah, that's a shame. Let's see. Okay, here I see what you're seeing. Let's try again. I can just share my screen. I can try and share. I believe you're sharing the wrong screen. I'm getting from the tech team, but I only have one screen. So that's a bit strange. How about now?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and get back on track. And yeah, Martin, jump on in if it's not working. So I'm not sure if you saw the nice graphics with the map of Finland and the Nokia phones and the ice hockey players, but here they were. I got the race car going on there. I hope you can all see it. And then getting into the iPhones emerging there. So sorry, I'll try to get back on track there. I think what we can see with these trends is that companies that have had a great product, that have had kind of this "we have arrived" syndrome, a bit of arrogance, have failed to really understand the kind of extent of change going on around them. And of course, we could look at the transition into electric vehicles now, what's happening with Tesla emerging, what's happening with lots of Chinese newcomers as well entering the market, and how old OEMs are dealing with that. I think there are some similarities there. And just so you know, backstage people, I can't see the chat now while I'm sharing this. So if there's any problems, just Martin, please jump on in. And I think it's good to look at the this electrification trend, of course, in light of these kind of business development more in detail as well. And I think we should really understand that electrification is comparable to the shift from horses to cars. It's just going to be huge. And I think we who are here at this seminar today understand this since we're working with electrification. But just to kind of draw one parallel, I got really interested in, I'm really interested in industrial history and history of different companies. And I heard about this company called the United States Leather Company. Not the most innovative name. This was one of the largest companies in the US in the early 1900s. It was one of the original companies, just 12 companies that were included in the Dow Jones index from the start. they were doing great because they were selling saddles and whips, and everybody was riding a horse, so they needed their saddles and whips. And they kept, of course, making what had worked, selling saddles and whips. And when the Ford introduced the Model T and automobiles started taking over from horses, they kept focusing on the saddles and whips because it had worked. And they kept focusing on it until they went bankrupt in 1952 and are still the only company of the original Dow Jones index companies to have gone bankrupt. And I think it's kind of the same thing today with companies that might be manufacturing exhaust pipes only, or something that's really not going to be needed anymore in the future. It's easy to kind of see that this is their destiny in the future, but it's hard when you're actually in it to be looking around. And I think we can see that these companies that have instead succeeded, they've managed to create a learning environment while they're also looking around them for inspiration, kind of preserving the core of their business while at the same time continuing to innovate, encouraging learning and innovation. Now, what happened with Finland, of course, is that after Nokia, the country had a huge talent pool of engineers and other people with high competence levels. And we've seen that these people have gone on to start new companies that are now creating success, such as Virta or Kempower, for example, to name a few that are working with electrification. And I think the other thing that we need to understand is that electrification is really a part of a larger transformation towards a more sustainable society. And why I think we have to understand this is because it's so all-encompassing, and this is where we can find these kind of synergy effects between what's happening in the field of electrification and what's happening in the rest of our society. And also to understand how it's being driven by so many different interests and different factors that it's becoming unstoppable. And if we look at trends within sustainability and like how it has started quite slowly, there's been a lot of talk about sustainability for a really long time, but I think it's really now starting to pick up pace. I found this statistics really interesting if we look at how executives see sustainability. This is from the World Economic Forum just this year. So we're looking at percentage of executives agreeing with the following statements. The business case for sustainability is clear. In 2022, 21% of executives agreed with that. In 2023, it was 63%. And the same goes for looking at the cost for sustainability initiatives, whether it outweighs the benefit or not. The executives are not seeing it as a burden anymore. They're seeing it as an opportunity. And this is one slide, this is one quote that kind of explains how many executives are thinking. It's quite often used. It's from Henrik Henriksson, who was CEO of Scania back in that time, now is CEO of H2 Green Steel in Sweden. He said that integrating sustainability into the core of your company's purpose, strategy, and operations is central if you want to stay relevant to your customers, investors, and employees. Unless you succeed with this, your customers won't buy your products, investors will not be investing in your company, and you will find it hard to attract top talent. Now, we might want to add to this equation insurance companies, banks, companies in your supply chain, and others who also have an interest in you becoming more sustainable. And I think it's really good for us to think about this and look at different kind of stakeholders who are increasing the demand on sustainability. Because I think what companies sometimes make a mistake at is that they look at all the regulation that's coming. And it can be state aid, it can be subsidies or new taxes, or it can be new legislation. In the US, you've got the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA. You've got lots of EV mandates on state level and other things like that. In the EU, we got the taxonomy, which is directing investments in the more sustainable companies, and we got the CSRD for sustainability reporting. All these kind of new regulations emerging. And sometimes it's easy to kind of just check, okay, how do these affect us directly? And that's where we can be missing lots of opportunities, because these kind of things are also coming from our customers and employees and partners and banks and investors. And they might in their turn be affected by the regulations or by other stakeholders. If we think about, for example, a company with a large fleet of vehicles, they might be electrifying the fleet because new regulations might ask them to do that, because they might want to be able to drive in the city center that's becoming zero emission zone. They might do it because their partners are asking for them to do it, or because their bank is giving them a cheaper rent if they go electric, or that their customers are asking them to go electric, or that their employees want to get the benefits of driving electric trucks with less noise and less shaking, which in itself is a good social sustainability advantage of better work environment. So it's really being driven by so many different factors and stakeholders that it's hard to stop. It's become like this flywheel that's catching motion and just going on its own energy. We can think of, for example, subsidies that are being removed in some countries as electrification is picking up pace, like in Sweden, where we used to have a climate bonus for purchase of EVs. Now, these kind of political decisions can slow down development for a while. They can be kind of bumps on the road. In Sweden, we see that sales of EVs to private customers has slowed down compared to previous figures, but companies keep buying EVs even more than before, because there are so many different aspects that are affecting their will to electrify. And I think that's important to notice, that, like I said, it's becoming like a flywheel. It's becoming something that's self-going and strengthened by all these different actors, so that just some changes in political leadership, for example, are speed bumps on the road. And speed bumps, they may slow you down, but they won't make you turn around. So I think the direction is really clear where we're going. If we then look at the new mobility landscape and what electrification is doing to companies here, it's important to start with just stating something that might become obvious for us now, that electrification is really causing a disruptive change of our mobility landscape. And now disruption is a kind of trendy word that I have a bit hard for sometimes, but I think in this case it is justified, because we will no longer be driving somewhere to fuel our cars. We will simply recharge them wherever we park. And this has lots of effects on so many things in our society. If we look at businesses within hospitality, for example, retail, restaurants, hotels, they can attract customers, they can strengthen brand value, they can improve their sustainability value by offering charging to their customers. So we see that restaurant chains like McDonald's are partnering with charge point operators so that they get charging at their restaurant sites, which in turn attracts customers to their restaurants. There was a study by the American Retailers Association that said that 80% of all EV drivers shop at local retailers while charging, and that EV drivers spend an average amount within the retail location that exceeds $1 for every minute that their car charges. So charging can really be an effective way of getting more foot traffic into your store as well. We can also see how supermarkets are going now from simply offering charging at their parking lots to also integrating the charging solutions into their loyalty programs, so that members can, for example, earn loyalty points by charging or spend their loyalty points on charging. They can also get personalized offers on their mobile app the minute that they plug in their vehicles. These kind of new solutions are emerging all the time, and the companies that are fast to grasp them will get some advantages. I think within the hotel industry, at least here in the Nordics, I haven't really seen this kind of coupling of charging with loyalty programs. I'm really looking forward to it, that some hotel chain would be offering, for example, free overnight charging for their premium members or something like that. I think it's going to be interesting to see where this development goes. I think it's also kind of funny that gas stations can actually see increased profit margins and advantages in electrification, because to someone who's kind of new into thinking about electrification, it might seem like gas stations are kind of threatened by this development. But instead, we see that they're opening new flagship stations where you have better food than just the regular gas station hot dog. You got playing grounds for children, nice areas to walk your dog, or whatever you might want to do when you're stopping for a bit longer time than just a few minutes that it took to refuel your car. And the thing is that this example is from the US, but retail, snacks, and food, they account for only 30% of gas station revenue, but they bring in 70% of the profit, because net margins on fuel is so low, whereas on retail items, it's often around 40 to 50%. So there are actually great new opportunities here for lots of companies. We can see one example of this if we look at the road trip between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. Really nice, popular drive. Long enough drive so that no matter if you're driving electric or combustion engine, you're going to want to stop somewhere along the way. And halfway between the cities, there is Barstow, California, a small town where I think the military is the largest employer. And now outside of the town, we have the outlets at Barstow, a shopping area, popular rest stop already before electrification. But of course, with EVs, there are lots of chargers emerging there. And with the chargers, you get more traffic, you get more cafes, restaurants, shops opening, which call for more chargers, and there are more retailers coming in. So it's really caused this positive spiral that's contributing to new jobs, new income, new opportunities in this area. And this is just one example. This is one of the largest fast charging sites in the US, I believe. For example, here in Sweden, we can see similar kind of examples, but on a bit smaller scale. So for example, on the road between Stockholm and some of the mountains regions, you have these charging sites where you see new restaurants coming up in really small communities, which is really important. I heard about this restaurant owner in Ljusdal, which is halfway between Stockholm and the mountains, where the restaurant owner was saying that the best thing that's happened to him is that this charge point operator established a couple of chargers just outside of his restaurant, and now everyone who stops to charge also stops to eat at his place. So there are lots of opportunities emerging, both in urban areas, but also I think in rural areas, which is often kind of overseen. If we also look a bit at fleet electrification, we can see that charging is really the main challenge and main opportunity for companies within taxi or delivery or bus or trucking. We don't really see yet a one-size-fits-all solution, but what we're seeing is really interesting new partnerships and new mixed cases emerging. We have a taxi company that invested in a couple of chargers for their own vehicles that then opened them to the public as well. We got cooperations between trucking companies and bus companies who need fast chargers at different times and are actually making joint investments in them to make it more economically viable. We got workplaces that are investing in chargers for their employees, but that are also renting out the chargers to local communities or to residents outside of office hours. And these kind of novel partnerships are really smart, where companies can be sharing their costs and their risks and making the investments more viable. We also have one trucking company in Sweden called LBC Frakt, which was really early in investing in heavy-duty battery electric vehicles. So they couldn't basically find public charging along the roads where they needed it. So they started establishing their own stations together with a utility company and a gas station company. So now they have a subsidiary co-owned by these companies that's actually building truck charging sites. So lots of new opportunities and new partnerships emerging. And then kind of lastly, it's also so important to see this kind of electrification of transport in light of a larger transformation of the energy landscape. We're increasingly depending on renewable energy production, which is more fluctuated in production between different times. At the same time, transports and industries are electrified really fast, and the investments in grid infrastructure are lagging behind. And I'm sure lots of you who work with electrification have heard the question of how is there going to be enough electricity for all of this? What are we going to do when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine and everyone decides to charge their cars fast at the same time? And well, I got some good news to everyone asking about that, because with smart charging and smart energy services, EVs are becoming an asset for the grid. And there are some great opportunities in this transition as well. So of course, we've seen load balancing where you can react to the effect available in the local grid. We start to see more and more companies that are actually selling frequency balancing services with connected chargers so that they can just momentarily stop charging to balance the frequency in the grid. We're also seeing house owners and industries investing in large-scale batteries to be able to buy energy when it's cheap and to use it when it's more expensive, or to sell energy back into the grid. We're also seeing companies that put these batteries in between the chargers and the grid so that they're able to both establish chargers where there wouldn't be enough effect in the grid and also sell effect back to the grid. So in this sense, it's kind of a win-win situation for the CPO, for the charge point operator, for the EV drivers who get access to more charging, and for the grid operator who can think about their investments in a smarter way. And then there's the economic side of this. So according to a report from Bain & Company, the global profit pool for EV charging sector is expected to grow between $8 billion and $13.5 billion by 2030. And smart energy services will represent roughly 1/3 of that profit pool. So there's great potential for large win-win solutions that can actually enhance our electrification of our society. I'm gonna try and wrap this thing up. I think what's important for us to keep in mind is that organizations that really succeed in developing this kind of learning environment, that are open to innovation, that are open to new ideas while at the same time being focused, are better positioned to get stronger in times of industry change. This is of course not easy, but I think that the second point kind of plays into this as well. We're seeing all these new kind of partnerships, new kind of ways of working between companies that are becoming so crucial as so many companies are kind of entering new fields. They need to find their new roles together. And this can also be a great way of getting these kind of new insights, new ideas, new innovation. It can also be a way of increasing the utilization of assets, as with the mixed case uses of chargers. It can help faster adaptation to new demands, shared risks and costs. It can be a way of dealing with potential challenges in the supply chain if you have a better dialogue with the companies that are in different parts of it. And then lastly, I was saying sustainability is such a huge shift that's happening in our societies. Everything around us is really changing and needs to change. And in this kind of transition, sustainability really needs to be a part of the company's core strategy as well. It cannot be something that's done kind of on the side with one hand. It needs to be right there where it can be driving the growth, where companies can see the opportunities emerging in this transition. I'm going to finish there. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to questions. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn for continued dialogue. If you're a Swedish speaker, you can also listen to my podcast where I talk to people who know more about these things than myself. You can find it where you find your podcasts. Let's see if I can stop sharing the screen and if Martin is here.
Thank you, Antti, for a very interesting speech. And we have quite a few questions from the floor. So
nice.
Let's start with the first one here. You're very optimistic about the opportunities, but what are the major challenges that you see? What can go wrong in this? So,
yeah, things are moving fast, so there's of course lots of challenges to do with that, and I think we're seeing that skills shortage is a huge obstacle for actually making this shift happen. And it comes down to electricians, it comes down to people working in the factories and the production units or driving the trucks. So I think this is where we all kind of need to do more. We need more cooperation there between the political and the business communities as well to make sure that we get people into the jobs that are actually out there. I think that's one. And the other one is really that the political world has always been kind of slow, but it's becoming more and more obvious now when we have some issues with grid capacity and these kind of things, that technology and businesses are moving really fast, whereas we also have the bureaucratic structure, which is kind of slower.
Okay. Yeah, on that note, what do you think should be the main driver? Should it be the industry that drives that, driving the consumer behavior? Or is it the legislator that should go in and do the legislative part? Which one should be, or is it maybe a mix of the two combined?
Yeah, I think it's a mix, and I think we're hearing lots of more people saying that the business community is the new kind of environmental movement almost, because things are moving fast, and we see that the private sector is really driving the shift now. But we also need the policymakers, and we need businesses to kind of know what the expectations from the political side are, so that there are not these kind of sudden shifts that we've seen, like with the subsidies that were removed overnight in Sweden, for example. It's kind of harmful for everyone to not be able to know what's coming. Yeah.
So the policymakers really need to be having a longer time span and to create a stable market. Is that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely, and definitely we need more dialogue between the political world and the business community as well, because we need to work on this together. But I think it's really positive that everybody wants in the same direction. It's just a question of speed and how to get there, really.
Yeah. Another question here from the floor is: are there any business models in electrification? You meet a lot of companies in this area that you find extra interesting, that maybe capturing new ways of thinking or creating new behaviors. You touched based on the gas stations, the way that they change their kind of offerings to the customers. But are there any other business models that you find extra interesting in this area?
Definitely. I think there are lots of interesting business models that are being tested, and it's kind of up to the future to show what's going to work. I think I'll get back to the partnership as kind of a cornerstone of future business models, because I think that companies kind of need to see who can complement them in a smart way. For example, with the restaurants that partner with charge point operators, so that they make a win-win situation where both can actually kind of focus on their core business and what they can do best, but at the same time helping each other out. Because I think it can be kind of dangerous to think that you could just go from doing one thing into doing something that's totally different, like going from being a restaurant business into becoming a charge point operator. It's quite a lot more difficult than one might think, and that's kind of one of the risks that I see, that some companies may think that it's really easy to jump on that kind of new venture, whereas it might be smarter to just try it with a partner first, so that both parts can actually do what they do best.
Good. So with the change of the landscape, the ecosystem of, it sounds like if you are into a business where with the electrification, something, it will change. The business landscape will change. So basically, you need to make sure that you understand the changes, and from that, maybe you can select the different partnerships that could be interesting. Or is that the way?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. I think so. Yeah. And really looking at the different kind of customer needs that might be occurring and new kind of behaviors emerging. Just like the thing with the gas stations, that one might think kind of pessimistically that, okay, we're selling gas and now people are gonna go electric. That means that we're in trouble. Or you might think that, we're providing services to people, we're selling them food and whatever they need on the road, and now they're going to need electricity and they're going to need to stop for a bit longer time. How do we make the most of that? Can we sell them better food instead, or can we I don't know, I think there's lots of opportunities there. We might see a barber shop emerging at the gas station, something like that.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I mean, I'm driving fully electrical vehicle myself, and what I noticed is that when we stop approximately 1 hour at the charging point, and we select, even though the electricity might be more expensive, we choose the nice spot over the kind of bad spot. So I totally concur with your conclusions there, that it is important, definitely. So another question that we have here in the chat is that, and thank you for all the questions, by the way. Let me see here, which one? You meet a lot of companies that are working with sustainable solution or sustainability and so on. And it is growing. We see the demand. We see a lot more interest in this. But are there any specific areas in that ecosystem that are kind of missing the point, that you would like to nudge them a little bit and say, hey, people, you need to step up because you're losing momentum here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm thinking it's a bit tough to answer. I always try to be quite diplomatic, so I don't want to put anyone on the spot. Here, but we can say that, for example, in the Nordics, we have lots of electricity grid companies, lots of them on the local level, and I think that's where we're having challenges, that they all have their different ways of doing things. And especially if we look at the kind of smart energy solutions emerging, that lots of the smaller grid operators aren't really there yet in terms of digitalization, in terms of business models, in terms of kind of facilitating these kind of new solutions. So I think that's where we're kind of lagging behind. No one named and no one forgotten, or how do you say? But that's definitely something that's a bit of a challenge at the moment, that there are so many actors who are really not used to this kind of really rapid transformation. I mean, most of them are just used to kind of, dealing with the urban grid in their municipalities, and there hasn't been that much happening there in terms of development as there is at the moment. So it's that's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, and connecting back to Stefan Hyttfors' presentation, seeing the acceleration, the curve of acceleration, that actually we are in a time period right now where things are happening really fast. So
yeah, definitely,
you better be on that train rather than to be at the station. So sustainability work, electrification is becoming more and more important to include in the business model and to
Yeah,
create
definitely.
a sustainable model.
Yeah.
And one other question here. You mentioned that the energy landscape is changing, and with the vehicle-to-grid implementations to kind of localize to make sure that you have energy where you should have it at the consumer at the time of when they need to consume it. How far away in time are we in terms of that? And of course, in Europe, that varies a lot. But do you have any examples where you can say that this is a good example where we actually will see this be implemented sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's vehicle to grid. It's a really interesting technology, but I think that I'm not sure if it's always the best technology for this kind of issues that we're dealing with, because often with the cars you don't know where they're going to be parked and if they're going to be plugged into the system, and then you're going to also, at the moment, it's not so much the technological challenge with the vehicle to grid technology. If we look at all the parts in themselves, like the battery in the vehicle or the charger or the grid, but getting them all to communicate with each other is the big challenge of making the communication systems synchronized and work together. So that's one part of the challenge. And then, of course, who's going to take the cost? How is the battery life going to be affected? If you own the vehicle and you might, lose battery capacity faster because you're using the vehicle for vehicle to grid solutions, is it going to be worth it for you? Who's going to compensate you? So there are so many questions there that I think are unanswered. So to be honest, I'm a bit skeptical of the vehicle to grid solutions. I think we're going to instead see like smart charging solutions that can deliver the needs that we have, or stationary batteries instead of using the batteries in the cars. And it's a tough question, but we'll see.
Yeah, need to look into the crystal ball to
yeah. I know that there are some experiments going on local level. I know that there's something going on in Gothenburg in Sweden, for example. I think Volvo is part of it with the Gothenburg Energy Company.
Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. So looking forward to hear more about that on a local level. Great. Thank you very much. That was the last question that we had. Thank you so much for joining the Future of Electrification conference and for your
my pleasure.
speech. And it's possible to, as you mentioned, possible to connect with you on LinkedIn. And,
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.